Hello, I'm Robert, fact checker and science blogger and helping people who are scared of COVID-19. And this is for people in the United Kingdom especially, though there's things here that will be of interest to everyone. And my main message here is do not try to get COVID-19. That is a very bad idea. It will not even necessarily protect you from getting it again. If you get antibodies to COVID-19, then you may, with the absolute identical virus, get it again. It is not proven that you are immune from it. That is why there's so much expert criticism of this proposal by Matt Hancock to have immunity passports. And this is a deadly disease. It's not a disease you want to get. Only a small percentage die, but if 1 in 1,000 of young people die, then that's 1,000 out of 1,000,000. And if 1 in 10 of people over 80 die, then that's 10,000 out of 100,000. This is not acceptable to just let it go through the community like that. And absolutely do not let it get to you. So I explained to you how to protect yourself. I've done that in previous videos. I'll just say very briefly, this doesn't come through the air. The WHO have a mythbuster about that. It comes through droplets that have to get into your eye, nose and mouth. It's the only way it can get in. It has to come out of someone else's mouth when they cough, sneeze or talk or sing. That's the only way it can get from them to you, and then it can go indirectly onto their hands and onto a surface, directly onto a surface, and then you touch that surface, and then you touch your eyes, nose and mouth. So you can stop it getting into you by washing your hands before you touch your eyes, nose and mouth, and by keeping a distance from people who cough, sneeze or talk of 2 meters. Then there's no way for it to get to you. So you can absolutely protect yourself from this and make sure everyone you know knows this. The United Kingdom is explaining the physical distancing, but they haven't really clearly explained the other route of touching in your eyes, nose and mouth. And they haven't explained how they think it's airborne. Some of them seem to think it's airborne. It's not. And this is maybe part of their confused advice. So now back to the antibodies. And I want to explain why the theoreticians are saying, why the experts, the experimental scientists, not theoreticians, they tell us that antibodies do not mean, that it's not proven that antibodies mean that you are protected from this virus. So there's a very clear example of dengue fever. So when you get dengue, then your first infection is usually mild. But if you go back a year later and then you get it again, then you can die of it. Known as severe dengue, it's very serious and potentially life-threatening. And in that case, for reasons that are quite mysterious, the antibodies for dengue fever actually make it more serious the second time around. It might be that the low levels of antibodies are not able to defeat the viruses, and instead they just move them around to places that are more vulnerable in your body and just usher the viruses to the worst place they could be in your body. So low levels of antibodies are not necessarily going to protect you. And something similar to this happens with SARS. So COVID-19 is in, or SARS-CoV-2, is in the same family of viruses as SARS, and it's very closely similar to SARS, and SARS has similar kinds of characteristics to dengue fever. For instance, vaccine candidates for SARS have actually shown this paradoxical phenomenon I was just talking about. So dengue respiratory that disease and severe acute respiratory disease, RSV and SARS, have shown the same paradoxical phenomenon. And so COVID-19 might well as well. And so these were people who received the vaccine with stimulated antibodies, which then led them to develop a more severe disease when they're exposed to the virus. And so it's not impossible that getting COVID-19 may actually predispose you to a more severe version of the disease next time around. It's not impossible. It's not proven, it's not at all certain, but it's not impossible. And then with the vaccine, it's also a big problem with developing the vaccine for COVID-19. So when they developed the vaccine for SARS, one of the early vaccines actually triggered the immune system to attack the lungs. So instead of protecting the lungs, it triggered a response from the body's own immune system to attack the lungs. And they adapted this SARS vaccine so it was just one spike instead of a larger chunk. And then that spike triggered the right kind of antibodies that actually stopped SARS. And then that was the version that was on clinical trials and nearly was approved for SARS when eventually it stopped itself. So the same thing might well happen with COVID-19, and that's why they've got to be so careful with these vaccine candidates. Some of them, vaccines that they're testing, might make it worse rather than make it better. So you have to test them very carefully, and they might well need booster shots as well, because it mightn't be a lasting immunity. So COVID-19 is a new disease and much is not yet known. And for them to just go ahead and say, we're going to have herd immunity, just let everyone get it and then they'll be immune. They're thinking about flu. They don't seem to have even recognized that this is a different family of viruses. Flu does that. But this, it's not the same, it's not even the same family of viruses as flu. And SARS in the same family, it does not work necessarily in a way. The data about SARS is not very encouraging for the idea of herd immunity. And then the other downsides of the herd immunity idea. So first of all, it's been criticized from the beginning for its ethics. So if we get enough people infected for herd immunity, this is far more deadly than flu in terms of the number that die compared to those infected. Even for young people under 40, 1 in 1,000 is going to die of those that get infected. For elderly people over 80, then you talk about 1 in 10. It ramps up as you go up. If you're under 20, it's very rare, but you can still, under 20, if you're a teenager, you can still, if you get this, need to go to hospital. That's not too unlikely, and you might end up on a ventilator. And if you're on a ventilator, then you might be under it unconscious for weeks. You lose several weeks of your life under a ventilator, and then once you come out of it, and while you're under a ventilator, being under a ventilator means that if the ventilator is removed, you die within minutes. So for several weeks of your life, you would be dependent on this machine to stay alive. And then at the end of that time, if you end up on the ventilator, then your lungs, very luckily, it's not like flu. With flu, if you're on a ventilator for a long time, it damages your lungs. With COVID-19, if you're on a ventilator for a long time, then it's mainly that your lungs are not getting enough oxygen into your blood. And that's why you're on the ventilator, putting lots of oxygen into your lungs directly. And then once you are at the end of the period, then your lungs are still fine, but they are somewhat damaged, and it can take up to several months they think, but they don't know yet, to restore complete lung capacity like it was before you went under. So you might still get a bit breathless for up to several months. And then, so young people, and as Dr. Tedros said, young people should not think that they're invincible. They're not. Today I have a message for young people. He said, you're not invincible with COVID-19. Some people die. And 14% of people under 40 need to go to a hospital for this disease. It's not like flu. You don't get 14% of people going to hospital for flu. And about 2% of 20 in 100 need intensive care, ventilator and such like, and 1 in 1,000 die. This is not flu, even though some people get it just mild. It is also a very sneaky disease. For the first week, it seems mild to everyone, for nearly everyone. Some will actually progress very quickly, but most, they don't progress until the second week. In the second week, you end up in hospital, but you still think, oh, I'm going to be fine. But if you're one of the unlucky 2% or 10, much higher percent if you're over 80, then you start finding more and more difficult to breathe. Then eventually you can't breathe at all without oxygen, and then eventually you need to be on a ventilator. Even just oxygen through your nose is not going to work, and that's where, and then you can't talk anymore and you're unconscious, and you lose several weeks of your life. While doctors, running 2 to 3 doctors going around all the time trying to keep you alive and monitoring the ventilator and making sure you're getting the right amount of oxygen flowing every minute of every hour of every day of those several weeks. And if they get things wrong, you die. And if you're unlucky, you die. If you're one of the worst ones, you die. So your life will be depending on tired, hard-working doctors and intensive care specialists to try to keep you alive for weeks. And then, worse than that, you also are endangering the elderly people. So, as one anonymous doctor put it, you're barely even sneezing or coughing, but you're walking around and you're thinking, oh, you're great, nothing wrong, I got COVID-19, it's nothing much, I just got it, I got over it in a couple of days. But for several days before that, you were around infecting people, you didn't even know you got it. And then maybe you isolate for your 7 days for the United Kingdom, but you've already been infecting people for several days before then. And then after the period is over, you're still infectious, possibly for 2 weeks after you're over. Our quarantine period is totally insufficient in the United Kingdom. It's not based on the real scientific data. And so you quarantine with other people, then they get it, and they go off and give it to other people, and one of them gets them worse than that. And then they give it to someone else, one of them's a friend of your granddad or grandma, and they die. 1 in 10 chance of dying. And or some old ladies that you don't even know. Is that fair? You tell me. And so and then the one of the things that troubles me a lot are these theorists. They have been trained very well in maths and in theoretical ideas. They do not seem to have had the most basic training in ethics, moral philosophy and ethics. They just do not have that way of thinking. And people get very much up in their headspace, and people who are very intellectual can get very head-orientated, and they lose the kind of connection with the heart and feeling sometimes, just very much in ideas. And so this was one professor, and he said nearly 10% of people aged over 80 will die in the next year, and he points out that the risk of them dying if infected with coronavirus is almost exactly the same as the risk of dying anyway. And you get other people saying the same thing. And so, what does it matter? They've got a 10%, 1 chance in 10 of dying anyway. So now we've got a 1 chance in 10 dying coronavirus. Of those 1 in 10, quite a few might have died anyway this year. So what does it matter? That's how they reason. That is deeply unethical and very, 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 very unethical. So if, for instance, you take a 10% chance of dying that year, then that means they have nearly a 50% chance of living to age 87. And if they're in reasonable health, they have more like a 75% of 87 and a life expectancy of 94. Because the older you are, the higher your life expectancy, because you've lived through all the things that led up to then. So you haven't had your traffic accidents, you haven't had your heart attacks and things when you were young. You've reached 80, and then you've got a higher life expectancy than someone who is just 20, and who would maybe be 87. Yours would be 94. So if you're in reasonable health, then you could well live to 94 if you're 80. And if you reach 90, then you've got a chance. Again, you've got a good chance once you've got that far to live a bit further for many more years. And so these people are people with dreams, with wishes. It could be that their dream is just that their grandparent or great-grandparent, great-grandfather, grandmother, and their wish or dream is to see their great-grandchild go to school, or for their children, their grandchildren to go to university, and to be able to talk about their dreams and things, or to just to be able to live long enough for their great-grandchild to start to talk and or start walking. So these are important dreams. You can't say that just because they're over 80, it doesn't matter that they've got a dream of wanting to live long enough to see their great-grandchild talk and talk to them. And then some of them will have other dreams, like they've got something they want to accomplish, some project they're involved in, maybe some local project in their village, or maybe it's some world project. Some of these will be doctors, and they're actually still in. They're some of them doing medical research, over 80s, but many over 60s as well, 70s. Some doctors stay in service until very old, quite old age, the more specialist ones. And so some of these will be doctors out saving lives. And I talk a bit there, but you shouldn't say that the great-grandmother whose dream is to live long enough to talk to their great-grandchild when they start talking. You can't say that's a lesser dream than the person whose objective is, say, to build a solar plant, to help to build solar plants in Africa or something, or design a new kind of electrical battery or something. Whatever their dreams are, those are equal in my mind. I don't think you should say that one is lesser than the other. They're all worthwhile dreams. And these dreams are being cut short if these people try. And it's just not okay to say, okay, this person is going to has a chance of dying this year, and they're not going to live many more years, so what's it matter if they die? That is deeply, deeply unethical. And people need training in basic ethics, I think. So some of you may know that I studied philosophy and moral philosophy, and so perhaps that gives me something of a perspective on this. I mean, that was not my speciality subject. My speciality was philosophy of logic and philosophy of maths. But I did undergraduate 2 years of philosophy, and I studied moral philosophy, and I had a special interest in Aristotle's science, but also in his ethics, and I was very interested in Hume's ethics. And perhaps some of these academics would benefit from studying these ethics, some of the ethicists, philosophical ethicists, because being very academic and up in their head, that may help them to connect to their heart by studying these people who are studying the ethics of the past and in the present. Anyway, Dr. Tedros put it like this: no, I think this particular issue, especially about our senior citizens or the elderly, is very, very important. If anything is going to hurt the world, it's a moral decay. And not taking the death of the elderly or the senior citizens as a serious issue is one of the moral decays. And Mike has said it, that's Mike Ryan, Dr. Mike Ryan. Any individual, whatever age, any human being matters. And it pains us to see actually in some places, when they want to move into mitigation because the virus kills seniors or older people only, that's dangerous. Whether it kills a young person or an old person or a senior citizen, any country has an obligation to save that person. So that's why we're saying no white flag. We don't give up, we fight. To protect our children, to protect our senior citizens. At the end of the day, it's a human life. We cannot, I've said this many times by the way, we cannot say we care about millions when we do not care about an individual person who may be senior or junior, who may be young or old. And if anything is going to hurt the world, it's a moral decay, and not taking the death of the elderly or the senior citizens as a serious issue is one of the moral decays. And I totally agree with Dr. Tedros on this. This is a moral decay. Now, the WHO never criticised governments. He said this before on March the 9th. It was March the 11th, I think, the United Kingdom moved to the delay phase. So he said this before they moved to the delay phase. I think he was trying to influence people to not move to mitigation. I had no idea that they were really considering this and that was what the delay phase meant. But he's probably been talking to these people, talking to the UK government, trying to persuade them not to do this. But they never publicly criticised people. The WHO never publicly criticised the government. He hasn't said it's a moral decay since then. But he said it very clearly then, just before the United Kingdom made this decision. And the thing is, we do not have to do this herd immunity. So then, I think I'm going to divide this video into two. So that's 20 minutes. I got as far as talking about the moral decay. Now I'm going to talk about the herd immunity and how we can actually stop this, crush this, stop this. And we don't have to do this herd immunity. So that's my second half. I'm going to stop that now because I think ending at this matter of that it's a moral decay and that elderly people matter, the 1 in 1,000 young people also matter. So the 999 young people all going around and partying, 1 in 1,000 dies, 20 in 1,000 are on ventilators for weeks. These people matter. And you don't look at the 999 that recover, you also look at the one person whose dreams have been cut short as a young person. And all the things that they were going to do with their long life, again, cut short because of COVID-19. And this is happening today. There are many young people around the world whose young life has been cut short because of COVID-19. And that is happening in the United Kingdom. Just the other day, yesterday, 2 nurses whose young lives were cut short because of COVID-19, as well as elderly doctors. Oh yeah, so I should just say that on the moral decay thing, that I did this calculation that if we go up to 50% infection in the United Kingdom, then you are talking about, just based on talking about taking figures of mortality rates for Italy and the United States, applying them to the age distribution of doctors in the United Kingdom, then just calculating and multiplying together, and suppose half of them get it, then you get 1,000 doctors will die in the course of this infection if it gets as far as 50% infection, and 750 nurses. We've had 4 doctors so far and 2 nurses. By the end of this, then if it goes all the way that way, you're talking about 10 a day maybe at the height, maybe even more, maybe even getting up to 100 a day of these doctors dying at the very peak of it. This is absolutely not at all acceptable. We should never have done this, and we should stop it now immediately. And so anyway, and not even to realise, not even to think like this, like the way I'm talking is kind of obvious, I think, to most people. If you've got a reasonable heart, if you care about people, care about other people, if you've got warm feeling in your heart of worrying about other people when they're sick and wanting to help people, then this idea that 10% of elderly people dying this year don't matter. You wouldn't even occur to you. Thought wouldn't even pass through your mind, even to begin to think that. But some people have somehow bypassed that or lost track with it because they're over-intellectual, very academic, as one of the people put it, kind of wooden. Wooden, not feeling in your heart. Just kind of like this. Intellectual. And so it's not their problem. It's not their fault. We need these intellectual people in society. The intellectual people are very important. They do good modelling work. They're doing very useful work. And that they don't have this connection with ethics normally makes no difference at all. And over a period of years, then these people would gradually, their models, and they've models disprove, and other people find other models, and they come with other ideas. But we have put a whole group of theoreticians and made a direct connection between them and government without any dialogue at all. The WHO statements, none of what I've said today, this statement about a moral decay, that was not reported in the United Kingdom. The method I'm going to describe about how South Korea has reduced it tenfold, that has not been reported barely at all. I mean, if you try and find any report in the United Kingdom about this being a moral decay before the 11th decision, all they reported of him was test, test, test. And before that, some various other things. They don't even explain the test, test, test. So it's partly the journalists as well. They're not reporting it. So anyway, that is that. I just cannot stress this more important than that. That we absolutely must not, we should not, we fight. And this for anyone who's not very good at picking up on metaphors, fighting here is a metaphor. We fight to save lives. And we do not put up the white flag of surrender, and every single individual life matters. You cannot say you care for millions of people if you do not care for individual lives. And that is the point at which I'll end this. Do be sure to protect yourself and follow the instructions to keep yourself safe, and also, just as important, stop it going from you to anyone else. Now I'm going to talk about the way we can bring it down quickly and stab on it, this thing, and totally crush it, this virus.